Okay, it is 4 p.m. and I will go ahead and call this meeting to order. And I apologize, I'm just trying to open this up. I'll go through roll call of planning commission members present.
There, please, Eric.
I have Howard Schritz,
Here.
Yeah.
Abby Dahlman, Joey Edwards,
Here.
Lupe Bobadilla, and Jamie Seifer.
Here.
County commissioners, Commissioner Munch, Commissioner Marcella,
Here.
and Commissioner Fiedler. Okay, changes or additions to the agenda?
I have none.
No.
We had minutes attached for June 12th and June 26th. The 12th would be Howard, myself, and Joey.
I make a motion, we improve the minutes of the 12th.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and then we had minutes
Thanks,
from
guys.
the 26th, which would be the three of us also. No, it's June 26th.
I make the motion, we approve those minutes, 26th.
Okay. And Joey's seconding it, it said.
Second.
All in favor? Aye,
Aye.
great. That moves us right into updates.
Okay, let's see, update. So, our next regular meeting is a joint public hearing. We will have the rezone application and a conditional use permit for a group camp for you, during that time. And I think I kind of gave everyone, some good updates at our last meeting. We do have a meeting with community builders tomorrow at 3 o'clock. I'm super excited to start looking at potential engagement, not only on short-term rentals, but to help facilitate some of this work as we broaden it into economic development, housing, and conservation. And so really excited about that facilitation to kind of help us.
What's the date of the meeting?
The 24th. July 24th. So we'll have those two. And we have already had a follow-up meeting with Gateway Subdivision. Again, proposing approximately 400 dwelling units, with a high amount of those being deed restricted units. We did provide them with a completeness review, and they think that they're very close to resubmitting. So tentatively, I would imagine that you would see that in August, that sketch plan.
Okay.
So.
And record is Commissioner Fiedler is in the meeting. So we have old business tonight. We are going to play with our map layers and kind of talk about parcel development infrastructure between County Road 17 and 36. So if Bryce wants to open that up.
I'll pull that up.
And Cece sent you the use tape, or the use table too, when you get there, so you have a hard copy in there. We can screen share.
Jimmy, you want to scoot around a little bit? Thanks. Okay. So, based on last meeting, I went ahead and blocked out some more areas that are not quite developable, right? And this doesn't mean that nothing can happen on them, it just means that they're either a cemetery, all these are cemetery, or they're existing neighborhoods. Even if they're low density neighborhoods, I doubt we're gonna be, going in and redoing Mountain Pines to make it higher density. So just an idea of what has been taken out. And then to give you an idea of what we're talking about, right? Just Mountain View, kind of from Safeway along and everything to the south along the railroad tracks to County Road 36, also known as the Boulevard. So we're just talking about this area in here tonight, but you can see that a lot of that area is already, existing subdivisions or other parcels of land that can't be developed for some reason or another. But when you do, so when we look at just this area that we're looking at, and we see what is not on the blackout layer, and I can go countywide on the blackout layer if you'd like to see it, but this is it. This is what we're left with. 46 parcels, including some that are actually not quite, to the north of 36. So there's some overlap here. This one extends over Mountain View, this one extends south of Boulevard, et cetera, but 46 total parcels that aren't in subdivisions in this area of focus.
Bryce, can you show utilities? Water and sanitation?
And I might want to turn off the labels of the roads now that we're a little bit more familiar with it. I just wanted to show them so they're going new. Let me see where down here. We might have to change the order because this isn't, unfortunately, the drawing order is a big deal on this, right? We're always trying to fight drawing order to see what we want on top.
Or we
That's why I
could
brought my computer.
generally, okay, because we could just generally kind of talk about where, anything that's outside of that. So unless you want to talk about it, but I was just thinking, you could just kind of generally show where, what would be in and what would be out.
Yeah, so I think the easiest way to do that would be to turn on the actual distance. Oh, okay.
Well, can we take off the yellow?
Yep.
Because we'll just know kind of to look in
Right.
between those two areas and then use the
Okay.
yeah, that helps a little.
So that helps a little bit, especially with knowing Parkville, but I mean, you can see Leadville Sand is pretty much already taken up. There are some pipelines through some of these parcels though, connectors.
Mhm.
And so there's a little bit, you have some stuff down here too, connecting down to their sewer plant. So there is quite a bit of sewer infrastructure, just not necessarily inside the district proper. And then Parkville, yeah, a little bit more extensive, right? Inside the district, their lines are a little bit limited, but we do have this entire area kind of to the east of Community Fields, which is inside the district and also showing up as available greenfield land, if you will, or brownfield land.
Mhm. And all of these parcels that we're talking about tonight are already currently zoned UR, right?
They are not all of them.
Oh, no, not all of them because of the 36.
There's some, and yeah, we're talking about anything, so this one up here, I believe belongs to Leadville Corp.
Yeah,
And that
it does.
might not be, but everything else is zoned UR that we're looking at, except for this corner, which is RC.
Mhm.
But yeah, we can see all the other parcels in here are already zoned residential. It's worth looking at the use table for what urban residential actually allows, right? So you have two-family or duplex, but, multifamily is a conditional use in the UR, right? And so there's some rooming and boarding house. So these higher density uses are conditional
Mhm.
in the UR.
And I'm not sure, not to get too down in the weeds, but rooming boarding house is really kind of a dated use, I would say. I think we have a couple different definitions too. So if we're just gonna look at like housing density, we might look at the types of housing units that we have right now in our uses, and then what is a use by right, what's conditional and what's prohibited. Don't think there's too much prohibited, I'm sorry. And UR is gonna be our highest density that's a straight residential. So two-family or duplex is a use by right. A manufactured housing park or a subdivision, it rightfully is conditional. A manufactured housing, single wide is a use by right, a double wide is a use by right. Non-qualified manufactured housing, again, I think this is a term that's a little dated, is prohibited. But I would say that would be like something that isn't either a HUD home or Colorado, it wasn't designed to be in Colorado. Multifamily, which is 3 or more, is conditional. Rooming boarding house, maybe that's still a term, conditional. Single family is use by right, accessory dwelling unit is either a use by right or conditional. We have been talking about making that a use by right. But the criteria for conditional is it has to be greater than an acre. Many of those are, that are in the UR, obviously. Backcountry structures are not allowed. All other housing is prohibited. Group living, assisted living facility is a use by right. And I think that'll take us out of our residential uses. No, it doesn't. So group living situations, assisted living is a use by right, treatment facility is conditional, and a group living facility is a use by right. So those are our residential uses in the UR.
Does multifamily need to be on sewer and water, either by code or just by sort of physical reality?
Yes, they have to be, so the building code and the land development code says that you have to have a verifiable source of water, legal source of water, and by our regulation 43 septic, you have to, if you're not in district, so if you would be in one of these areas that you wouldn't be able to get into park or into, and actually I'm gonna take that. Well, I'm gonna tell you two different things. So the big answer is yes. And then we have some caveats on if you're out of district for a one of those, then you'd either be well and septic, except if you are in the urban residential zone district. And then our code says you must come into centralized sanitation.
Okay.
But a well and septic would be good in the top left.
In the kind of the rust color. Yes. So that so as our code says right now, so the gray, you would have to expand the sanitation district to serve any kind of subdivision of any of those areas. Obviously, some of those parcels would be, because the minimum lot size in the UR is 7,500 square feet. The minimum lot size in the rust color recreational is 3 acres. So significantly different density between the rust areas and the gray area. Urban residential is our highest, other than rural multifamily, which is kind of an oxymoron, but it is our highest residential density.
You know, 36 with the boulevard, looks like there's a lot of available properties there, but in reality, they're all taken up. And,
Yeah, like there's a house on them, but I think the idea is that a developer could still buy that large parcel and do something with it. Whereas one
If the
that's already,
price was right.
yeah,
Yeah,
if the subdivision is smaller, then it's harder, or all the little lots are already subdivided.
So then I think if you consider the Lake County augmentation plan in those areas, I just, so subdivision in those, like on 36, that would put, the development typically will seek out coming under the aug plan if it was available before going through their own acquisition of water.
Well, and I guess a couple of things that, just as far as us starting these conversations and thinking about it, I think rezoning a bunch of properties is possible, but I think it's also not the easiest thing for us to go in and change. But I guess the lens that I would like us to be kind of viewing through is, are the density standards appropriate? Like, so you see the urban residential in that section in there, which means that somebody can do, what did you say the lot size was for?
7,500 square feet.
7,500 square foot subdivisions, lot subdivisions in that area. And making sure that A, we find that appropriate, we find it appropriate for utility infrastructure, we find it appropriate for a view shed, we find it appropriate just in general, for access to schools, for access to parks, for all those things. And then where in this instance we have the RC zone far bigger lot size requirements, is it appropriate there? And is it something that if it's not, and we're like, oh, it should be higher density there, is it applicable for the whole zone district or only right there? Because if it's only right there, then maybe you are talking about a rezone versus the whole density standards for that zone district. So I guess I just want to like set the tone as far as like what we're looking at here is different lenses to be using this as our analysis in deciding what the county master plan, kind of can look like, I think is helpful. My first look at like the stuff that's zoned UR, that all feels as it should to me, as far as like those can be small lot subdivisions if they go through the appropriate, channels and have the appropriate infrastructure figured out to do that. So UR makes sense. Over there, some of those rust colored ones, understanding some of that topography, I think that's probably reasonable as well, what those are zoned, but I think that's kind of the conversation too, I guess.
And I would just throw out too that, keep in mind that most development would probably, like if they came into like recreational, and they needed to, most performers, I'm not gonna say all, performers need to do a PUD to be able to get to the density that will pencil out, given, I just read something today and cost of building homes have obviously has exponentially increased, but I think I saw a standard that said like 10 times what it used to be. So, a lot of times in different areas like that, you'll probably, if someone were to come in and think about those areas, regardless of the zoning, that would probably be areas that you might see a PUD application.
And with that, I think the other piece that's interesting to think about is it's really easy for us to get stuck in the mindset of like a developer coming in and developing this into a subdivision. But
Right.
if you're changing density standards and or you have a certain zone district applied to a certain lot, it could also just be one or an individual who's going through a minor or doing something in that way that now you're saying it's appropriate for this area to have the 7,500 square foot lots versus over here, it's, a much bigger lot density. So keeping that in mind, that it's not just the developers that we're thinking about, because I agree, most of the time, all of these guys are gonna end up doing a PUD to fit in there. But what do we, if we kind of know what the vision is and that this area is suitable for that, but this area is not for different reasons, like, because I think view shed to me is a piece of it. Like if we're talking about putting in a 300 house development out on Highway 24 towards Twin Lakes, like I feel like that's something we have to consider. Do we want that whole valley to be littered with houses? Like, is it appropriate there, or is it appropriate where there's more density closer to town? So just those kinds of questions and pieces that we're trying to look at. So it's a lot, but.
No, that's a really good point. In your comp plan and, every your 3 mile PLM, they're all gonna point out that you want your higher densities, exactly like Heather is mentioning. You want them closer to your urban core, you want them on centralized utilities, and you want them, that's really where you want to encourage your higher density, generally.
Mm-hmm. And the other piece is, the other thing we don't have a lot of that doesn't get mentioned as much is business, commercial type uses, right? And so we want everybody to work in town, but where are they gonna work? And so it's kind of those questions too, of like making sure things aren't just focused on the residential piece and identifying if there are areas that we need to be adding potential commercial uses. And I'm not saying I see any of that in this section we're talking about, but just as far as like this process, I think it's important that we're looking at residential density, but also those other uses that I think are crucial to the future of Lake County.
Sure.
Would it be helpful for us to go through what commercial uses are allowed in either of those zone districts?
I think so.
Can I ask a quick process question? Just curious what the desired outcome of this conversation is. Are we trying to find areas to rezone? Are we trying to find a parcel to put on a brochure to sell to a developer? Are we like, I think there's a ton to digest here and talk about, so.
Yeah, I think this is all informing future land use planning maps in anticipation of a new comp plan in 2025. Right, so we haven't had a comprehensive plan done in Lake County since 2015. And I think we can all agree our community's changed quite a bit and the needs have changed and the built environment has changed a little bit too. And so it's just like a standardized update, but also we're kind of at that point in growth where we have to really look at things with a much more close lens. And the thing about that I think spurs it on for me too is just that we are, like Heather was just mentioning, we're kind of out of commercial, industrial, or business land, very few parcels left for that. And so as we try to look at a balanced economy going forward and, accommodating maybe houses or housing developments that match our community's goals, but also making sure that our economy is robust enough to support a full community, that's kind of where we're at right now. And just the very initial phases of looking at our current zoning, current lay of the land, and what potential there is in the future.
Yeah, a really big educational piece, I think, for all of us that are gonna be a part of that decision-making process, informing that comp plan and future map planning. But I think it also helps having these conversations for the next development application that were to come in. We've kind of already discussed, everybody kind of already knows. I mean, I think before Bryce put together these layers, there was potentially a lot of people who didn't really understand how little there is left to develop in Lake County. And so understanding that as a planning commissioner and making decisions on future development, I think it's really important. Like, you need to know what the situation is right now, what it looks like, where there's opportunities and where there's just not. And I think having these conversations, although there may not be a piece of paper that ends out of this, it's getting everybody on the same page and having the conversations. Are there changes that need to be made? Or are we really just analyzing what we've got?
Right.
Cool, that's super helpful.
So really no, tangible outcome other than informational, educational, just kind of gathering an awareness of what kind of zoning's out there and what's allowable in these areas and how many parcels, aren't dedicated to other things. And
Yeah.
so it really is just some education right now because we're hoping to go engagement with a very facilitated. So this is just, we have a little bit of extra time and we never really dive down into these kind of discussions. We're always looking at things in a very narrow lens sometimes. And so just trying to broaden that.
Yeah, and I would say this first piece, I kind of intentionally asked us to start with because I don't actually anticipate there being a lot of things that we don't feel like fit the way that they are right now. But I think, we've had development applications come before us before where the community doesn't feel like that density is appropriate for where it is, because of recreation, because of view shed, because of what have you. And we had no ability to deny an application based on that because the zone district approved those kinds of subdivisions there. So I think this also helps us because if we identify places that, now that we've seen, Lake County is in this huge growth spurt and probably isn't ending anytime soon, I think we have a different lens than when they came up with these zone districts and density standards way back when.
Sure.
So if we need to adjust some density standards, in understanding that, hey, this zone district, I think the intent was this. I mean, some of them we even talked about are named terrible names.
Yeah.
Do we need to do some simple code amendments that redefine the name, like rename the zone district even, so that people really understand this zone district, this is what the intent is. Because I have a lot of people even that will say, oh, well, that's zoned recreational, so I can do all of these things, and you're like, no, actually, that's not what it means, and so trying to get those lined up, I think, and then understand that, okay, we've decided this zone district's intent is this, and are the density standards then appropriate? And I think by looking at this map and really understanding where everything is right now, once we get bigger and analyze more sections, we're gonna all kind of get on a better page of what is RC zoning really? What do we think it should be called? And is it appropriate, and are the density standards appropriate? There may be in this process some areas where we're like, that really shouldn't be zoned that, it really should be this other zone. And then I think we can talk about rezone. I just know that rezones are a much bigger fight against property owners to try to be like, nope, we're changing your zoning to this. Kind of like Backcountry was a 12-year process, you know?
Right.
So hopefully there's not a ton of that, and more of it's clarifying what our zone districts are they appropriate, and do they have the right standards attached to them?
Especially given the infrastructure and just challenges we have. And I think that's where, Jamie, if you weren't here at a couple of the other meetings, I just want to back out a little bit so we can look at the blackout layer we were talking about, which is just trying to identify what land is actually available to develop in Lake County, because we have this perception in Lake County that we just have endless land, and we do, but 75% of that is public. You know, BLM or Forest Service or Fish and Wildlife. Another 5% is under conservation easement, and then another percentage is actually already built up. And so we're talking about all the land that's left in this giant county, or this open county rather, we have less than 5% left. And so we have to be really careful as we're going through a growth spurt of how we develop that. We can't just let it be, you know, a Wild West or free for all.
And kind of what we talked about before too, is like, it's really easy, because right now the hot topic is housing, so it's really easy to get super hyper focused on the residential piece of that. Where can the next development go? But we gotta remember all the other, I would like us to really remember all the other pieces, like not just developing a piece of land because it's available. If it doesn't have great access to parks and schools, to me, that's not fair to put in a big housing development and be like, oh, you guys all gotta just stay in your houses now. You know, like, I just feel like it's important that we're creating that connectivity and access to outdoor spaces if we're gonna allocate that. And then the commercial piece of it, making sure that we're not saying, okay, you know, and there was an application recently that was kind of my concern, is like, we're so focused on residential that we're ignoring the fact that we have very limited good commercial pieces left too. And so I think understanding that we need to build the county as a whole in that way with what's left is an important piece of the conversation.
And so this is a good example of what is left, right? And in this, so anything that's blued out is basically minus some projection errors on the mining claims, but you know, you can just see we have very limited area. Southern Lake County, you know, maybe around Twin Lakes. This is actually mostly Mount Massive Trout Club, so probably not super developable. Homestake Trout Club, not super developable. And then, this is Tennessee Park, which is mostly owned by Pueblo Water. This is owned by Donala Water. So even within this, we still have some actual, like, theoretical.
Unlikely,
areas to develop.
yeah.
Well, unlikely, but still potentially developable. So, you know, within that, we're trying to focus on the 3-mile plan of Leadville. Well, really, as we discovered last time, 3 miles from Leadville gets you mostly IN, Mount Zion, which we're now learning is some of our last most pristine wildlife habitat we have in the county. And then this area up to Turquoise Lake that we're talking, or, you know, airport area, which is a much bigger discussion to come. But yeah, so this is kind of what we know we can support high density in, let alone where we should.
I had a couple thoughts just to.
Yeah.
One is to Heather, your point about rezoning being difficult. I also think if we find some individual parcels or swaths that the zoning seems a bit off, it seems like we could also be a bit more surgical and add some criteria into, or you know, change the use of criteria, and that might be a lot easier.
Agreed, than trying to rezone stuff, yeah.
Yeah, what was my other thought? Oh yeah, on the comment on infrastructure, in terms of the area we're looking at tonight, I mean, I do wonder if taking a more fine-grained look of like what is the parcels that are currently served by water and sewer, and really looking at those, and seeing if there's any tweak or change to really encourage or remove barriers to higher density there, because that really seems, and also to your point, like that's close, you know, more feasible to like walk or bike or to get into town and be part of the community, get to school, everything. So really focusing on
Like that,
those, like maximizing the, not
That's my dream.
sensibly using the existing infrastructure to the
Correct.
extent possible.
And I don't think,
So I'm gonna reload
Yeah, go
so we
ahead.
can have the sewer and water lines on top.
yeah, so the, Westwoods on Evergreen Drive there ran sewer and water, but I believe they did it in such a way that it's not super, I mean, it's possible to tap in. It's just gonna be expensive for Jack across the street because he was not a part of the payment of that, so that, but I think that's it, like, then it runs to Mountain Gate right there.
If they do, if they put in the New York plaster, I thought that would help with the water, so.
Yeah.
If that comes to fruition.
So that piece right there is being talked about for a fairly good density development there.
Like 200 units in that area.
Uh-huh. The other parcels along Evergreen Drive there all have like primary homes on them right now, but that doesn't mean they won't ever, Jack owns the big one on the bottom.
Mhm.
So some of those, obviously, those could all be access water and sewer because it runs down the line, and then water and sewer run to Mountain Gate, as far as down County Road 4. And then Mountain Pines and West Pines both have sewer but no water, so water ends at Mountain Gate.
Okay. Yeah, you can, very hard to see, and I can change the color, but yeah, you can see the dark blue line in there. There's also a dark blue line here.
Yeah. And then on Mountain View, on those like Four Seasons, but the water doesn't run, right, it runs to Silver Hills, but on the other side of the, I don't know.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah,
yep.
I don't think it runs on this side.
Four Seasons is interesting, cause yeah, some lots have gas, some lots don't, some lots have sewer.
Well, because it was developed originally with septic and wells, and then they pulled the water in there, so now they all have water.
Okay.
And so does.
Some still have an old well, but they all have water, and then they all have septics. But then, as you can see, sanitation runs Silver Hills, but it doesn't go up to Four Seasons or Jim Valley. Other than those little lots right there. So a lot of those vacant parcels, I guess what I'm getting at, in the area we're looking at, unfortunately, don't have access to water and sewer. Sewer is the best one, just because it does connect, like it runs in between, there's a sewer line easement in there. I don't know how big the line is, if it's serviceable for a subdivision.
Or if sanitation has the capacity to even tell you that.
Right.
Sorry, did I say that out loud?
The code requires them to figure that out, so. Correct. If it's urban residential, it has to come into, or the district has to deny it.
So this is where some of those parcels that are further down, and then the ones off the boulevard, which we'd have to zoom out a little bit for, those are ones that for water would most likely, I would assume, be OG plan type things.
Especially in this area, yeah, I
Because
mean,
there's no water line anywhere close to that. Right? There's nothing close to the boulevard water.
no, cause, yeah.
Correct.
When you say og plan, that would mean wells.
Yeah, part of the county's like you'd get they give the augmentation rights.
They'd have the right to water and then drill a well.
Yeah, but then the problem with that becomes you have like a community well if you're doing any kind of high density.
Mhm.
Because you're not gonna do wells on every lot, small.
So how many users can there be on a well before it needs to be managed like Parkville?
I'm not sure what the state regulates on that. I mean, you have to have the augmentation plans to create a subdivision with well water. But I'm assuming it would have to run like Panarch, where there's couple of community wells that are commercial sized pumping, and then you have water lines run through the subdivision to feed each house. But you'd have to have appropriate water rights.
Parkville does the annual test for what metals, what minerals, what pollutants are in the water. They probably have purification plants of some kind. At some point, a community well, I would think would need that.
Yeah, I'm not sure how many, I'm sure they do,
I
but.
mean,
I think it's 26 users or something like that, 26 or 29, where you then have to chlorinate and all of that stuff.
Okay,
Yeah, treat it.
so I'm just looking really quick. This shows that none of the parcels we're looking at tonight currently have water.
I mean,
But, you know, adjacent to.
technically
these.
those would,
Yeah.
but that would
But
be,
yeah,
that's
you have
it.
Silver Hills. It looks like Four Seasons does have water running through it.
Mhm.
Yeah, it does.
And so there would be, I'm not
They
sure if
do,
there's any
'cause it
easements
freezes.
out.
Yeah. Now, could they run it, extend lines, but I think the problem is that my understanding is the Mountain View line isn't awesome for that. I know they have problems with the Silver Hills line, but maybe that's just because it doesn't cut, he was talking about how he needs to come back and connect. We'll have to bring him to a meeting sometime, but as far as service down County Road 4, which to me is where the most, County Road 4 and 9, I think are where the majority of those are gonna be accessed, and then the boulevard.
The boulevard looks like the hardest to connect.
Mhm. So although the density for UR there is probably appropriate, it's just gonna be more hurdles, and costs for a developer to go through.
what would it take to specify utility easements to these areas? Would that require landowner approval?
I would say that's up to a developer to do. I don't think we would be establishing easements as this work. That would be responsibility of development if they wanted to, to establish those kind of things. But that's part of land development, not really part of planning, I would say.
But as far as density standards and such for those two zone districts that are up, and we can put those on there if we feel like those are appropriate for both of those areas, and kind of understanding.
And yeah, so I would just first say that, development, the big threes in development are water, sewer, and access. So if you've looked at water and sewer, and then all of these have good access. So I don't see a lot of big barriers to development, because if they can't come, the only thing that, except for the gray areas, again, the code says they would have to find a way to come into the district if they wanted to subdivide those areas. And if they weren't able to do that, then the district would have to say that it wasn't possible to bring those in. And then there is the possibility of individual septic systems, but it would be at the discretion of the district in those areas. And the odd plan would service, potentially, those areas could petition the odd plan. There's not a guarantee there. It just depends on availability of water and prioritization of that water, but they could petition. If they can't come under the odd plan, then they would have to go and acquire water shares and go through the legal process, which is generally what all subdivisions in Lake County, it is what all subdivisions in Lake County have done. So it's not, again, it has been achievable in the past, it's just the odd plan is such a huge benefit. And so maybe that helps with the thought about where would it be good to prioritize Lake County water as we kind of go through this exercise, just kind of thinking about, we anticipate there would probably be a lot of interest in coming under the odd plan. And so as you walk through this, maybe thinking, would there be priority to that water? To think about that. And then if it's helpful, I could run through those uses in UR, because two Just Point, I think that we wanted to kind of think about coming at this of potentially using zoning where we could upzone instead of downzone, and then maybe looking at our table of uses more in that tool to get a little more specific, instead of maybe looking at, unless you see like a big concern, but obviously downzoning or changing the zoning is not something to be taken lightly, and probably maybe is a last resort. But where you can add uses and make things more fluid and incentivize things, that's a pretty much of a win. So I'll just do the UR uses really quick. So in the UR, institutional and civic, you can put a college, conditional use permit for college, conditional use permit for a membership club and lodges, community activity building is a use by right. All other community service type uses are conditional. Home-based daycares are a use by right. General daycare is a conditional use permit. Clinics, medical and dental offices are conditional. Nursing homes are a use by right. Cemeteries are conditional. Golf course or driving range is conditional. Oh, excuse me, just a minute. Take that back. Golf courses are prohibited, which makes sense because they should be in the ag forestry. Parks and playgrounds are used by right, as noted previously. Religious assemblies are conditional. Safety service of any type is conditional. Schools are a use by right, but public or private boarding schools are conditional. Utility facilities underground are a use by right. Solar energy systems large are conditional. Solar system energy small are conditional. All other basic utilities are conditional. Commercial offices are conditional. Special event facilities are conditional. Outfitting and guide is conditional. Bed and breakfast, 1, 2, and 3 guest rooms are conditional. Short-term rentals, if they weren't under moratorium, are a use by right. And that is the extent of the uses that are either allowed or conditional in the UR. That's it.
Do you know what the city's maximum density is per acre
Whoa.
housing units?
No, I
The
can't
maximum
remember
that we
because it,
want is, or because they're just in the midst of increasing that density. Maybe Joey, can you answer that
40?
question?
Pardon?
Oh, 40 units per
40 units
acre?
per acre.
Do you know what the minimum lot size is? I think,
Well, that's 1,000 square feet per
It's the
acre.
minimum, it's the minimum existing lot size currently, which is
okay,
20 by 95.
okay. So our, if you did it dwelling units per acre, I think we're about 8.7.
5.8.
In the urban residential?
43,560 divided by 7,500.
Yeah. No, dwelling units, or 600 square feet.
Oh, sorry, I'm just thinking lot
Yeah,
sizes.
yeah. 8.7 dwelling units per acre, I believe, right?
that's how it ends up equating, yeah.
So the 7,500 square foot minimum lot size.
Right, so how many dwelling units per acre is 5.8?
Yeah.
Oh, no. Okay, maybe it was 5.8.
Yeah, so less than 6 per acre
Oh, that's right.
with current lot size in the urban residential, right? So I think that's something worth considering, is that that's still pretty, compared to the city's density limits and goals, that's pretty generous. The city is now allowing.
Right. So do the, do,
43,560.
no, 5,000. Business, how many dwelling units per acre for business?
8.7.
Okay, that's.
That's okay, yeah.
I was like, I know one of them's 8.7. Okay, so
Well,
5.8.
and what's interesting, so, just for funsies. We have those houses or those properties on County Road 36, the Boulevard, that live there right now, right? They have most of those have a house on them. And the lot across the street decided to come to us for either a residential subdivision or a college, just so we know right now, that's used by right, and they'd be allowed to do that, and all of those neighbors are not gonna be happy about it. But are we okay with that? And I think that's what the purpose of this exercise kind of helps us with, is being like, no, we feel confident that, yes, if it's gonna go anywhere, this is where it belongs. And good with that, that even though historically it's been these larger lots, we feel like that zoning is appropriate there. And then, flip side of that, like over the reddish rust color zoning, we feel good about that, you know,
Yeah.
They're-
larger lots.
they're bigger lots and probably appropriate, it's a more view shed kind of place and river and all that, but anyway, that was just as far as trying to envision, since those use by rights were listed and or conditional use, Outford or Guide could come to us tomorrow and be like, I want a conditional use permit on that third lot in there and use that. So those are kind of, I think, what Ann was getting at as far as knowing if the use by rights are appropriate for these zone districts. And maybe we'll start with a map, you know, as far as all these conversations, having a bunch of mapping looks, but then later we'll be able to go through the use table even more so and say, after looking at everything, we think this should be pulled out of there, or should be conditional, or should be allowed. So I think it's just interesting to put it into play.
Does it make a difference who's moving? I mean, like, a baby boomer probably won't need schools for children, but people who work at resorts may be more likely to have children and need schools. Does that enter into the conversation?
As far as trying to project who our future buyers are, you mean, as far as who the
Yes.
future Lake County residents are?
Tough.
Yeah, it's pretty tough, but I mean, if I were to err on the edge of that, I would say it's definitely, you have more of the older population that end up having to move out than you have moving in. So it is definitely a younger population typically that is moving into our high elevation climate than we see the older population moving in.
But to your point, your higher densities, that's the reason for trying to keep the higher density developments inside of that 3-mile circle. So they are closer to schools and
Yeah.
grocery stores and everything else.
Mhm.
Yeah, you get outside of that, just like some of the mobile home communities outside of town, they do run into some real serious transportation issues and lack of access issues. All the way down to things like bus stops not being available, yeah. So yeah, the 3-mile radius is important for higher density developments. Yeah, what do you do when you get a 600 unit subdivision down in Twin Lakes? Yeah, our bus service couldn't handle it, the school bus service couldn't handle it.
So would it be up to the developer to provide that? In the same way that they would provide sewer and water?
Yeah, it would become all part of that conversation for sure.
They'd say
And there's
they
not,
would.
this zone district, for instance,
Right.
is not, you know, in the town of Twin Lakes to allow that kind of density. So they would be looking at a PUD, which then requires all of those conversations and negotiations to happen. And I think that's why we're making sure that these areas are ones that if they just come forward without a PUD, is it appropriate?
So would an organization like HMI qualify as a college, like you're talking about, as
It
a
would be
full
this-
right use?
It'd be a private boarding school,
Mhm.
and so it's conditional. They were conditional. So it's, HMI has a conditional use permit, so does Colorado
Sure.
Outward Bound.
Sure.
They're both conditional. And they're ag forestry, aren't they?
Yeah.
Out there, they would, yeah.
And they have their own water shares and augmentation plan, and they are self-sufficient.
Well, the way it lays out right now actually seems to make a lot of sense, and you're right, the terrain makes a big difference for the larger lot sizes in the rust-colored areas.
Right, and the rest of the
A
areas,
lot of
keep
that's
in mind
just not
that
developable.
so anything higher density than a duplex is prohibited. So you can't do any kind of residential there in those rust areas right now in the table, higher than 2 units, or a primary and an accessory dwelling unit. So an accessory dwelling unit in all those areas is a use by right, as long as you have water and sewer that will supply. Or a duplex, so you can't get to any more dwelling units in those areas under standard zoning, any greater than that.
But you can see that some of them have already been, you know, you talk about there's a house on a large lot. Like these have already, this lot has been subdivided off so that the house has been accepted and then, you know.
I just had a subdivision exemption.
As a
isn't it?
subdivision, it could be the same thing, you know, where there's one lot and then they parcel off the house and it leaves the rest of the parcel available.
Right.
You know, that might be happening here eventually, or it's this one, yeah. But you can also see that it's really interesting that because of our, what's the regulation for the National Road Division?
0621 says that if a designated county road dissects a parcel, it creates an exempt subdivision.
Yeah, and so we've seen that a lot right here. You can see
Yeah,
this
those
40
are
acres is
all-
now all a bunch of individual lots that are actually all kind of compatible with the recreation lot size, so.
Right.
Yeah, and then because they're subdivision exempt, they were able to each get a well permit. So that's the other issue with that rust colored area is, Parkville, anywhere close out
Not
there
even
really.
remotely close, yeah.
And then, sanitation for over there, then we run into, just a reminder, and this could be an issue down County Road 36 at some point is, 36 might be okay. But I think over there, on the rust colored area, you'd have to do lift stations if you were to ever try to get a sanitation line to service those areas.
Right.
And currently, Leavenworth Sanitation is not accepting lift stations.
Yeah, that's
So,
a non-starter.
so I mean, it
So
appears
that would be-
pretty appropriate the way it's sectioned off right
If
now.
a subdivision was willing to put their own lift station in, sanitation would refuse to service it?
Correct.
Yeah, that's what we're
Currently.
hearing, but they're their own district, so.
So it would be up to the sanitation district to therefore deny an application, and it would be up to them to make a
So,
determination.
so they wouldn't be able to meet code because they wouldn't be able to come in with an approved sanitation plan. So, right. And then they'd have to do a wastewater treatment facility and they'd have to do their own.
Right.
But so far, anything that's been suggested, we had a subdivision that suggested a lift station and it was denied by the,
Yeah.
Right.
Tabor stop.
so that's been our experience. Just for education purposes, a minor subdivision can only be done once every 25 years. So anything that you can see has had a minor subdivision, so the next step, if they wanted to buy that property, again, within that 25, they'd have to do a major subdivision. And so major obviously is a much bigger lift than a minor subdivision.
And so you're saying that would apply to these two lots?
That one to the west had a subdivision exemption, right? That's the Hudson one we just did.
That was pretty recent, right?
Yeah, we just did that one back I think it was last year sometime.
Is there anything in the gray or the rust that's suitable for commercial?
There are commercial uses available in the RC.
Would commercial people
There's a golf
be
course.
interested?
Potentially.
Yeah,
There's actually, you're gonna find a lot more commercial uses in the RC than you are in the UR. Not a lot more, but there are more. If you want those, I'm happy to.
Yeah.
Okay, membership clubs and lodges are conditional, community activity buildings are allowed as a use by right. All other community activities are conditional, home-based daycare is a use by right, general daycare is a use by right. Cemeteries are conditional, golf courses or driving ranges are conditional, parks and playgrounds are used by right. All religious assembly is conditional, safety services is allowed and conditional, public or private day schools or public or private day are a use by right. Public or private boarding is conditional. Utility services underground is a use by right. Solar, all solar, so large is conditional, small is a use by right. Basic utilities are conditional. Group camps and vacation lodges are conditional. RV parks and campgrounds are conditional. Special event facilities are conditional. Private resorts and guest ranches are conditional. Riding academies, roping, rodeo, and equestrian areas are conditional. Bed and breakfasts are used by right, 1, 2, and 3 guest rooms. Bed and breakfasts that are 4 and 5 guest rooms are conditional. Short-term rentals are allowed. So more, are more your group camps, vacation lodges, something that kind of embraces the recreational aspect, maybe the comp plan. So, that's where you're gonna see more of those kind of commercial activities.
And in addition to them meeting the criteria for the code, they would most likely need augmentation for their wells, because it's really difficult to get a commercial well. So using any kind of commercial uses in those sections would be,
Even those commercial uses are very soft uses, no
Yeah.
retail, no
Right.
light
Exactly.
industrial, nothing like
No
that.
big gas
Exactly.
station out there.
Right.
Yeah.
So where would those kinds of businesses go?
Very little place for them to go now.
I mean, is it?
Well, and I think that's when we start talking about the
Pretty much.
other commercial
Yeah.
corridors on the highways, we'll start talking about business zone, in those areas, I think.
Yeah, it would be redevelopment of the airport, that's about all there is.
Or between Stringtown and town proper?
Potentially, and that would have to be
You know,
redeveloped.
but there's very few parcels in there.
Mhm.
And yeah, that's business zoned, but there's just not a lot of usable land.
Most of it is out on the highway. Yep, there, the trailer parks, 91.
There's
Sorry.
actually a small little bit of commercial industrial right there for the
Yeah.
tow lot.
Right.
Oh, yeah, commercial industrial. Saturdays.
So yeah,
is
almost anything else would
commercial.
have to be redeveloped, in other words, purchased and then redone.
Yeah, that's what, I mean, that's the whole thing, right? We're almost out of greenfield developable land that you can do something with without redevelopment, without tearing something down or,
Commercial or residential?
right? That's kind of where we're at, land use wise. And that's why the airport industrial park discussion is gonna be so important, is because that is the last large bit of developable land we have in the county, that's zoned, or could be zoned appropriately.
Does their land run all the way down to the highway?
Pardon?
Does their land run all the way down to the highway?
Who's land?
The airport?
No, you can,
Yeah, I didn't think so.
no, there's a big gap. Or I guess down to Stringtown?
It's down.
Yeah, this is county land.
Okay.
And so like, there's been talk of, either opening up this gravel pit again or redeveloping that site.
Gotcha.
The terrain's not as favorable, you get up here and all the terrain is flat. It's just that you gotta bring the infrastructure all the way up there.
Yeah.
Supposedly the FAA has asked the airport to level all that to the east of the runways.
All that overburden they have to take out.
They're doing a lot of
Which would-
forest work.
Which would become a quarry in effect. You
Oh,
gotta
like-
do something with all the rocks they're getting rid of,
Hmm.
and potentially creates more space for business park.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely being actively discussed for sure. Starting on the east side of the airport and going
I'm sorry, we're
towards
just
the east.
talking about a different area. I'll be quiet.
No, but no, that's definitely a major topic, Eric, because, it's flat, it's developable, the county owns it, but we gotta be really careful about it, because once it's gone, there is no more flat, easily developable land.
Is there another section that we want to kind of look at coming up? Or do you want to move into another area? I mean, so I think really kind of gave everybody kind of
That
a good
stepping stone,
idea
yeah.
and start thinking, through
I would
that.
think we'd wanna go north, just because that's the smaller section of our
Continue.
county. Yeah, go north and then we can go back and go south, but,
Yeah, if you look just kind of to the north from 17 to the trailer park roughly, I've included all of Grand West and the not developable lands, as well as this large portion, which is zone business, but is owned by Grand West and is under conservation easement. So it is not developable. This is BLM here surrounding the highway. Mount Zion, like I said, and actually this is really exciting. I was just in a meeting today. Next Monday, the 17th, we're having a community presentation of the wildlife modeling and maps that have been created over the last year. Very scientifically based geospatial data showing where our best habitat is left and where our most disturbed habitat is, right? And so just the anecdote I have from that is that it's showing that unfortunately, most of our habitat in Lake County is pretty fragmented. We don't have as much pristine habitat as Chaffey County does. But Mount Zion is sticking out like a sore thumb as like some of our best habitat.
The whole mountain.
Kind of basically, yeah, and then the Forest Service is actually helped by blocking off road
Yeah.
seasonally, just seasonally, but for, elk habitat and impact, and that has all helped, but, just wanna throw that out there as we look to the north and everything like that. It did unfortunately show the junction between Highway 91 and 24 south of the trailer park is some good habitat, but it did, but, might be a little
We
too
didn't
late
get
for
a
that.
CPW letter like that last time.
Right, and this is, CBW doesn't have this data until next
Until they
week,
have
right?
it, until they have it.
And that mapping, the same people that did the same kind of process in Chaffey County, that actually has been adopted into their land use code and must be developed. And if you're in a wildlife sensitive area, you actually have to develop or meet certain different standards than you would if you were.
Yeah, I like that.
So that's coming, and that's gonna be a huge help to us as we continue this process. But,
So all of that land there, just down in the UR, you have a bunch of it for sale right now.
Mhm.
So that's probably, something that we need to consider. That's likely gonna have a good
use.
bunch of, and I'm sure it'd have to be PUD of some sort and what have you, but just understanding that just the way the roads and things would access back there and the topography, I think there are some things to think about. I'm not sure necessarily that changes need to be made, but there's things to think about as far as that slope towards Highway 24 and how a new collector road maybe has to feed through there, to
That's
access
the
those.
old dump road, right? Right through there, dump area?
Yeah, right here, this is the old dump area.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
So Heather and Howard, do you recall when the county engineer, land use engineers came in and did kind of a sub-area plan for this area about transportation? And we found all those maps, and so if we talk about this area, I'd love to bring those
Yeah, those I
in,
think would be helpful.
and
I
we
only
kind of revisit
remembered
that.
Steve Smith putting one together for when he was talking about developing everything and he put new collector roads in there. I didn't know that the county did anything, but maybe they did it too.
Yeah, we had SEH, who is our engineering firm, who reviews all our subdivisions. At some point, they came in, because they did public engagement on it, because there's a report, and we do have some maps that talk about how to look at transportation needs in this area. So I think it'd be
Yeah.
great to
For sure.
bring those in and make those part of the conversation.
I think a mapper, Zancanella worked on that a long time ago. Frank Zancanella, yeah.
So, yep, we'll bring those in just for, might as well share studies and information that we did.
Yeah, because if you look through there, the section we were looking at before, pretty much every parcel had reasonable access from a county road existing. That up there, the majority of those don't have great access to a county road currently. So that's where then you start looking at those barriers and then just remembering, not necessarily zoning maybe doesn't come into play, but just understanding what you want that to look like, and how
Do you
it'll
wanna
feed.
stay like 91 west?
Yeah.
What is that?
Because
That's a
we
power
have some
line.
kind of
It's a power line,
Yeah.
gotcha.
weirdness over in,
Gotcha.
once we get east to 91, so.
I thought what jumped out to me when I was creating this map though, when I was blocking off the trailer park that is not developable, is that, it's still surrounded by undeveloped business zoned land. And maybe there's a potential for them to expand the park. And they have the zoning to do it, but just to consider, all the way up there, they have their own water and sewer kind of infrastructure going on at the park.
Yeah. It's a little, I will say it's a little interesting that the land right behind it is UR and not RC.
Actually, that is AF.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
sorry, it's using the default,
Okay.
but that is ag forestry behind it, yeah.
Okay,
so-
okay.
Which is good. They have, challenging access back here.
Yeah, no, that makes more sense. I just was, for some reason, you're right, it's a different color.
So should we shoot for that next time to just kind of look north of 91,
Yeah. we can
all the
bring-
way, could we go, where we cut off on 17?
Yep, use 17 again.
The parcels, because this is really interesting to note as well, is because we haven't seen it in our department, but we've heard that this parcel is being considered for development on its own. That looks to have reasonable density,
Yeah,
not 2-acre lots.
So, yeah, but we're not gonna talk about any specific.
That's right,
Yeah,
that's right.
no, but,
But
Just to
yes,
prove the connectivity is that we're already seeing interest in this area,
Yeah,
right?
just have to be careful.
Sorry.
It's okay.
That's right. But we haven't even seen it yet, so this is all, I have no.
We did do something, the community development team met with that proposal.
Okay.
behind Homestead subdivision,
Directly behind Homestead, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
and
But
then
yeah,
that's Gem
this,
Valley
there
on
is
the
a
left.
lot going in there.
There's a lot.
And so maybe the next time we work, which will probably be the first meeting in August. And by then, by tomorrow afternoon, I'm really hoping to think that we'll be moving, or we'll be getting much closer, so maybe by August, we'll have a much better idea of where we're gonna plug in with facilitation. And then we'll start having, some real intentional direction with it. But what we could do also and prepare, and I'm sorry, Bryce wanted to kind of work together and ended up working on budget stuff, but we could kind of do a narrative of this area to kind of do the introduction next time. We could just kind of go through and just kind of start off kind of explaining what's happening here, and then we can lead into some discussion in August about this area. Does that sound good?
Mhm, and we can go through the uses, I think, again, too, it'd be
Yeah.
helpful.
Because we've got a lot more happening right in here. So that 36 to 17 was a good start, because this one's gonna get a little more complicated.
Yep, and I think the other thing with that is, you have the purple business zone there right now, and if there's a new collector road put on to access some of the subdivisions down the road, is there potentially different commercial activities that then change that up a little bit too? So just thinking about possibilities of when they come through to develop some of that, maybe some of it does become rezoned for some more commercial type stuff as well. But anyway, totally
Well,
different
and
conversation.
I'll digitize a couple of those proposed collector roads, just so that the visual's there.
The little road that
And
stops.
we can
Is that
bring
right
in
next to Bill's?
the transportation planning.
Oh, yeah.
Is that
we
where
need
that
that
started?
transportation.
Are you talking about that
Bring
little red
in
thing
the
that they looked at?
transportation-
Yeah.
That's just a line right now, that's
Oh, it's not a
a,
road,
so that's like that little red line there is,
where your arrow is, yeah, what is that? Is it a road
because it's
currently?
not a county road, is it?
As far as Michael says it,
Is it
It's,
recognized?
yeah, he
It is.
recognizes it as a county road,
I
and I
think what is
can't
it,
remember what the
22?
number is it, because we were talking about connectivity from
I
that
was just
other
wondering where
parcel
that
through
split
there.
off of the highway, cause I don't know. that
it's,
road.
you'll see it, but it's just like
It's
through the trees.
barely, it looks like a driveway.
Yeah,
Okay, that was, okay,
It's right by the sign.
Yeah,
gotcha.
But we did, Michael did
County Road 17T.
17T, yeah, which we were looking at
So
that
it's
for
literally just an
connectivity.
access.
But there is,
no.
What did
CDOT,
Michael say? it was?
transportation
Or
planning.
Michael Irwin.
That we are going to
Oh,
map as
Michael.
well, so we can talk kind of about that, some calming
Mm.
measures that are gonna be done in this area, so we can talk about that, also some mass transit that, we talked about how isolated sometimes the manufactured home communities feel, and so we've got some mass transit work that's getting done, and so we can kind of talk about that a little bit next time too.
yeah, I think that's
So to just
actually
bring
gonna
in
be
some kind
big.
of general awareness of what's happening in this area.
Thank you.
How much of that was landfill?
You can kind of,
All
we
right.
don't know particular, it's gonna take some more studies, because it was done before the era of records.
For a long time.
For a long
But it
time.
looks to be basically the majority of, there's a little road that cuts across here that kind of forms a boundary, but it's the majority of this lowland area. I'd say this parcel is much more affected by it than these parcels, because this is a separate owner.
Is that something where satellite imagery with all their different frequencies and wavelengths might delineate something?
Possibly, but I'm guessing that holes in the ground out in the field are gonna be better for that.
Yeah, well,
Well,
those
yeah,
parcels will require
Light
baseline
on,
base too.
Yeah.
Yeah, just actual ground samples, but, who knows, and that's like a whole, with what we have going on in Twin Lakes, because that was a former county landfill that's now on Forest Service land, but we still have jurisdiction over it. I'm very happy that these are
Privately owned.
privately owned.
Yeah,
Great.
well, cool, I like it. The section we talked about tonight, does anybody have any other things that we didn't think about, or everybody feels pretty good about
No, that was super helpful,
being
thank you.
clear on that piece, and then we can move on?
Yeah, it was just leading into thinking about, discussions on other areas too, like we can talk about the landfill. Yeah, so when we get to different areas, there's certainly things happening all over, and we can share out kind of in different areas what's happening in those areas. We've got updates at the landfill, we've got updates at around the airport, we've got, so we could kind of talk about different things as we go around the county and just share out, the information that staff knows. And
I one additional thought, like, I don't know how we tackle this question, but like seeing all the potential density in there in certain places, just wondering like, how can County Road 4 and Mountain View support that in that area? Like,
Right.
so like, we really have like hundreds of
Agreed.
extra units down there. Holy cow.
And same with County Road 36, right? And so I think,
Oh, yeah.
and that'll be, I think that's where, I mean, I hate to be this person that says this, but I'm gonna say it anyway, is that I feel like it kind of works itself, like, the chances of every one of those turning into a 200 unit development is, before we're able to like start mitigating some of those, is they're not gonna all happen overnight, and they're not gonna all happen
Yeah.
really quickly. So I think it's one of those that right now, for us, we understand that if you're a developer coming here, you're gonna try to get one of those pieces off of Evergreen Drive before you're gonna try to go get that last piece off 36, right? And so it's one, just because of utility infrastructure and then the road upgrade and all of those things, because you're gonna have to meet that criteria to not be adversely affecting
You got
everybody
all the
around you.
pluses to start with.
Yeah, so I guess, I guess I sort of feel like the chances of every single one of those turning into a big development all even near the same time, that then knowing that the county, and maybe that's a discussion that happens after this with Road and Bridge, and maybe they're gonna have a master plan sometime that is like, oh yeah, are our right-of-ways applicable for, do we have enough right-of-way to expand this road? Is there enough in this section? And if there isn't, we need to know that so that it's not gonna turn into a higher density collector road or whatever.
When the county's ill-fated attempt a few years ago to clear both sides of 17 was going on, it was said that it was 100 feet on each side of the road
Mhm.
for a right-of-way. You'd need a lot of fill, but there's space.
So part of any subdivision application, during preliminary, code does require subdivisions to be responsible for the impact to the road access. So upgrades to roads that service subdivisions are part of what's required of subdivision. And then that also leads into just an update that we're putting together, Tim and I are working on a facilitated conversation on a fee study nexus, or a fee impact study, or fee impact nexus study, there we go. Potentially, because maybe we do need to start thinking of impact fees to look at maintaining infrastructure. So we are looking at that.
I guess yes, a lot of this is probably gonna just have to work itself out. I just feel like as parcels do get filled in, like, we're gonna start losing, I mean, I don't even know if there is any remaining opportunity to like majorly change road alignment or get ahead of the
Agreed.
curve, you know, all those things. Cause and I hear you that like individual developments have to like, whatever phrase you said, like, but that incremental stuff seems to never quite work out, cause you're not gonna make like one subdivision pay for like widening Mountain View.
Right.
Like, so that bigger picture kind of stuff, I think is never gonna happen, I'm sort of like, it's never gonna happen incrementally.
Well, and I think I mean, you bring a good point up that, and maybe that's the, like I said, another possible next step with this conversation is once we've kind of gone through some of these areas and identified where the most likely high density development is talking to Road and Bridge, talking about our right of ways and if they're big enough, because going and trying to get 7 owners to, you know, to do a bigger right of way because we know we're gonna need it is gonna be way easier than doing it with a subdivision and teeny tiny lot sizes that you're taking away 7 lots for. So, agreed that making sure that those are already allocated as reasonable, identifying if you have a development go here, is it gonna suddenly create all this extra traffic even though its access point is off 36? Is it gonna add all this traffic on County Road 4? What's the impacts over there? Like just understanding that your commute routes aren't getting impacted more from this development up the street, you know, whatever, understanding that all of those roads have the right of way, because, you know, you have that problem out there right now at Leadville Junction. It's like,
Right, so.
it's not a wide enough road.
Yeah.
And it's just gonna keep getting busier on that road, you know, and so it's just like, what do you do there? So, yeah, I agree. I think that is a part of the conversation for sure.
But I also think that's probably an engineered master plan. to
Yeah,
try to
no,
do
yeah,
that.
totally. I just think knowing it though in our heads, I
Right.
agree, if we're like paying attention a little bit to that of understanding, because I think the other piece, and Bryce, I think, said it earlier, is, and Howard knows I've had this dream, is connecting, is extending the Mineral Belt Trail on the path that already exists on 4, and then going down 9 to Leadville Junction where the new trailheads are. It's like,
We gotta work on that.
is there enough room there for county road width as well as that path that helps the connectivity of more than just car transportation, like are we creating transportation other ways too? So I think it is all something that should be considered when we're talking about development and or,
Yeah.
Yeah. How do we get that done?
we're just gonna we have the time to sit down with Howard
Yeah,
and
we gotta sit
contact
down.
all we need to do is get a hold of those landowners on County Road 9 and get the easement, because it's already exists to County Road 9.
I think there's pretty good easement on 9 that's not taken over by.
Might be able to use the existing right of way.
Yeah, because on county, if you do it right away before we get buildings in there,
Mhm.
because on County Road 4, that's the big problem, is people put driveways right over the county easement.
Sure.
50 years ago.
Mhm.
The only problem is that area of road that I just talked about.
Yeah,
The junction here, like the.
You wouldn't be
the
able to
freeway.
get, I don't know where you
Willows.
would put, you'd have to get an easement and then go over, you'd have to build a separate off-road trail that
That's-
crossed the river somehow.
Yeah.
That would be
That's just-
the biggest nightmare over there.
There's a
But-
Keep it on the
bridge.
south side to avoid and the tilted.
But if you could do that, if you could figure that out, you could have, and it connected to Mineral Belt, you could have Groom Trail bring you from town to the Groom Trail at Turquoise Lake.
it'd be perfect.
It'd be pretty fantastic. So somebody just figure out how to build a bridge over
And the
there.
big thing is, it's gonna keep a lot of people from getting hurt on County
Yeah.
Road 4.
Yeah,
Yes.
for it, yeah.
That is the main, I told you guys the story about 42 years ago. They're going down County Road 4 home, and I saw the little girl sitting in the ditch, by the ditch, and I thought, son, what the hell? I backed up, and there she was. Her bike was all bent up, and she was sitting in the ditch and crying, holding her knee, and she had got hit by a car.
Mm.
Yeah, and that's when I got on this bandwagon, and it's been, I've been dragging it too much, and
Yeah.
love to get that done before I feel damn guilty if somebody gets hurt again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
Well, cool, awesome, well, I think this was awesome. Thank you guys for
Yeah.
putting it together.
That's good.
Thank you. I think talking through it really helped, like, just kind of identify that this was our low-hanging fruit area, right? It was just kind of easy to
It was gonna be
identify.
easy to not.
It's simpler,
Yeah.
yeah, and then it just gets more complicated from here.
Yeah.
Right, and I think what's very equally important is to have a talented mapper like we've got.
Wow, seriously, without those layers, we would just be lost in conversation right
It's
now.
ever.
You know, that one place up there on that one hill.
Right, it's good to get the visual, and especially with that blackout map, I think that just helps, just so we know what we're not talking about.
No, this is so huge, thanks Bryce, for all the work you do, yeah,
Picture's better than 1,000 words, right?
it really is, this is amazing. Well, cool, yeah, we can work on the 91, or that section up
Yeah,
to 24 there, yeah.
cool. Sounds good.
Thank you.
Motion to,
I make the motion to go home.
Second?
all in favor?
Aye.
Yay,
Alright,
thank you guys.
thank you, board.
Yeah, Ken, you had mine this week.